We welcome you to the monthly broadcast of the Utah Valley Technology and Genealogy Group. My name is Gerhard Roof of the presidency of this nonprofit 501c3 educational organization. We normally start with a word of prayer. I will say that today. Our Father in heaven, we are so grateful to Thee for the advantages that technology gives us in working on our family history. We thank Thee for the opportunities to share in one another's successes and the things that we have learned, and appreciate the willingness of so many to share that experience and spread that knowledge to others freely. We seek the blessings on our time together today, that things may be understood and a desire built to act upon that knowledge that we receive. In the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Today is the 14th of June, 2025. Our next monthly broadcast will be on the 12th of July. You can receive notification of the monthly speakers and their topics from our news release blog from our website at uvtagg.org, or go to blog.uvtag.org directly. We welcome the supporting members of our group on this Zoom broadcast and anyone else watching on our Facebook Live feed at our Facebook page. If you'd like to make comments or ask questions during the broadcast, please use the chat feature on Zoom or post them in comments for this broadcast on Facebook. When the presenter asks questions of you and you are on Zoom, you may unmute your mic and turn on your camera to interact directly with the presenter. We're pleased to have Laurie Castillo, a professional genealogist, teach us today. The title of her presentation is Lost Towns and Cities: How to Research Places That May No Longer Exist. She describes it with locating the towns inhabited by our ancestors can be difficult. Many of them have not survived. Some have had several names over the course of time and may be hiding in plain sight. The presentation will cover best practices for locating and identifying ancestral towns in general. There will also be discussion of lost towns, why they no longer exist, and where to find their records. Here are some details about Laurie's background. Laurie was born in Santa Monica and raised in West Los Angeles with beagles and land tortoises for pets and playmates. She played on the girls' basketball team for 2 years in high school and also loved participating in tennis, volleyball, and basketball. She misses the palm trees in her front yard and the smell of the ocean every day. After a really great educational experience in Los Angeles, she attended BYU, earning an AA in Communications and Fine Arts and a BS in Consumer Economics. She met Jerry Castillo from San Antonio, Texas, in Utah, and they have 2 children and 7 grandchildren. Laurie is currently first vice president of the Utah Valley Technology and Genealogy Group She is a former vice president, executive secretary, and board member of the Utah Genealogical Association. She's been a BYU Family History Library consultant, tour guide, and teacher for 32 plus years. She's been a professional researcher and writer for more than 34 years. She has presented at many conferences, including Roots Tech, BYU Family History Conference, and BYU Education Week. We Are Cousins conferences. She is a former Red Cross instructor, Girl Scout troop leader, Boy Scout merit badge counselor, and Chihuahua breeder. Her research specialties include Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, Canada, and Hispanic research, and New England, Midwest, Southwest, Mountain States, and Pacific frontier regions of the U.S. Her interests include history, mystery, geography, and genetics. All those add up or add those up, and you have family history. Laurie, we're glad you're here. The time is yours.
Thank you. My name is Laurie Werner Castillo, and we are here to discuss lost towns and cities, how to research places that may no longer exist. The techniques we cover will also help you with locating the history of businesses, colleges, churches, and other institutions and organizations that your ancestors were involved with that may no longer exist. Can you hear me all right, Gerhard?
Yes,
And can you see the presentation?
not yet.
Okay. Well, my husband is running the meeting, sitting next to me, and he just stopped me. He thought he had the right screens up. Okay. Tell me when you see what looks like the first page of a presentation.
It's coming now.
Now?
There it is.
And is the volume, do I have the volume up all right?
You're fine.
My microphone? Okay. All right. Well, we will move along then. Here we go. So to start out, let's talk about, let's give you some idea of the types of towns that exist in what became the United States. There's cattle towns and coal towns and college towns, farm towns, fishing and cannery towns, government towns, lumber, manufacturing, military, all kinds of mill towns, mining, port, quarry, railroad, resort, spa, and tourist towns, smelter and ore processing towns, whaling towns, just to name a few. And many of these towns were company towns as well. When I was researching Van Buren County, Tennessee, I learned that the county seat, Spencer, had also been the home of Burritt College for some 90 years. I realized that finding out about the college was part of my job to learn more about this area, but I wondered how would I do that? Well, I tend to just type into Google whatever I want to learn about. And usually there will be a Wikipedia hit, an article that will provide helpful information and hints for further research. Sometimes you run into another website about it. So what you see here is the top of the article about Burritt College. When you scroll to the end of these articles, you will generally find links for the information used in writing the article. So here we have 4 likely sources, and I'm going to show you those. The first one is from the Tennessee Encyclopedia, the article on Burritt College itself. The second one is a book that was written in 1914, Burritt, our alma mater, by several graduates of the school. So you can download and read that at Google Books, I found. This is called Pioneer of the Cumberlands, A History of Burritt College. It's a book, and it's all online. We're looking at the electronic version of the book here, and that's a wonderful picture of the original college building here. And you can see some of the names of the chapters in the table of contents, the top of that here. So that's a wonderful option. I'm bound to learn more about the town as well. And then there was a college yearbook that was put out every year that talked about all the extant colleges in the United States. And this is one of those books, and it's the entry for Burritt College, and talking about the number of students, instructors, books in the library, and all this kind of stuff that you might want to know about. Now, I also looked up Van Buren County and Spencer, Tennessee, for looking for sources as well. I ran onto something that I'm familiar with. It's a genealogical fact sheet about Van Buren County. This Tennessee State Library and Archives has organized genealogical fact sheets for each county, outlining what they have available in their collection regarding each county, and also pointing you to things they know about that have been published that are not part of their collection. So I think they're extremely helpful. And as I went through the one for Van Buren County, I came to a section, which I reproduced here, that shows you the film that they have with records of Burritt College, and I guess the church that was behind the college there. So this map shows some of the towns that were created as the Union Pacific drove toward Promontory Point. Many of these towns survived, some didn't. Many railroads and railroad spurs were created and subsequently closed when the need no longer existed. This usually spelled the demise of the town that lost the spur. So there are many extant railroad maps which may help you locate those lost railroad towns. And one of my favorite collections of those kind of maps is at the Library of Congress here. It has an excellent set of digitized railroad maps. They have a collection of about 3,000 maps, and they've digitized about 623 of those. And so you can blow them up and look at all the details. It's really nice. I just want you to know that I put a lot of material in the handout that you have. And so there's a section with other ideas about railroad maps as well. Mill towns were critically important in many areas of the country. Early settlers in New England wore the land out quickly as they refused to treat it gently as the Native Americans did. This area had thin, rocky soil, but many water resources. These rivers and coastal areas were eventually dotted with mill towns producing many types of goods that were needed and could supply a living for the townspeople. And you can see some of those items in the list that I provided here. This picture here is a reproduction of the 1636 mill that once stood. It's called the Plymouth Grist Mill. The colonists spent the first 13 years of the settlement pounding their corn in wooden mortars by hand, which sounds absolutely exhausting. Or they may have also used small hand-powered mills called querns, but basically they were just smashing it between a couple of rocks. And so I am sure that when they actually had a full-size mill ready to go and could get their flour by the basket or the bag, that was extremely preferable. So many of the lost towns in America, as I said, were company towns. At their peak, there were more than 2,500 company towns housing 3% of the US population. A couple of my favorite books on the subject are The Company Town, The Industrial Edens and Satanic Mills That Shaped the American Economy by Hardy Green, and James Allen's The Company Town in the American West. So, and I recommend having a look at those if you're interested further. And there's a lot of great material on company towns available. All right. I have a great interest in company towns. My father was raised in one. Over the years, it was known as Blue Diamondville, Blue Diamond Village, or just Blue Diamond. You see here a link I found for a history of Blue Diamond Village in Nevada, or in the Nevada Oral History Project. I just did a Google search for Blue Diamond and this came up. So let's have a look at that. This the home of this information is the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, or UNLV, and the library special collections and archives portal, and that's what we're looking at right here. On page 1 of the projects, you can see in the lower right corner the beginning of a list of related archival collections. And this was really exciting because right away I found the Angie Bogdanovich DeLong oral history interview. As a child, I actually knew Angie. Many of the Blue Diamond folks ended up in California, and some stopped by our home from time to time. I also found more interviews with her brother George, sisters Nina and Sophie, and their father. So that was really cool. And these are publicly available. Ray Phelps was the best friend of my dad, James, and his twin brother, Richard, also known as Dick, while they were growing up in the village. Ray and his family were the next door neighbors. My dad and my uncle died younger than the rest, and Ray actually wrote, assembled, and gave copies of this history scrapbook to all of the spouses and children of the twins. For this, I am more grateful than I can say. My dad died when I was only 26 and just getting deeper into family history. I had not yet asked him much detail about his childhood, although he took us on a trip where we did stop at Blue Diamond. So it was pleasing to me to see that he donated a copy also for the collection, the Blue Diamond collection at UNLV. All right. I also found in the collection of interviews one with Ray's sister Donna and with their father Reed, who worked with my grandfather at the mine and mill. So that's really cool to find. This is a Blue Diamond mine photograph collection that they have there. The records of the history committee that collected all of these things. And then you can see that there are corporate records for Blue Diamond Mine itself. And that's pretty awesome. The photo collection actually contains an image of the one-room schoolhouse that my father always talked about. Through further investigation, I found that my grandfather, Arthur Werner, was actually on the school board of that one-room schoolhouse. So who knew? You can see possibly in this, in the lower right-hand corner, a group of people standing out there. 3 of the children in this photograph are Werner's. My dad and his twin brother were 8 at the time, and their sister Dorothy was 11. I would like to let you know that my dad loved school and did very well here. When the family moved to El Monte, California, my dad and his twin brother went to a big city high school, and they actually won full ride scholarships to UC Berkeley, both of them. That shows you just how good their teachers here at this little school must have been. UNLV also has collections of early area newspapers, some of which are viewable by the public. Some of them you have to be a student with a student library card to look at, but luckily the ones I wanted to look at are free and available to the public. They're the Las Vegas Age and the Las Vegas Times, which were 2 of the earliest. Here is the December 10th, 1929 front page of the Las Vegas Age, which in the lower half contains the birth announcement of twin boys to Mr. and Mrs. Werner on the 7th of December, 1929. So it says, a pair of twin boys were born Saturday morning to Mr. and Mrs. A.J. Werner at the Union Pacific Hospital with Dr. F.M. Ferguson in attendance. Mr. Werner is an employee at the Blue Diamond Mine at Arden, which is an earlier jurisdiction there. And Mrs. Werner is the daughter of Charles Meller, a local Union Pacific employee. Mother and sons are reported to be doing nicely. So I got more information on the family there. I was pleased. Now, let me show you another way to find documents, photos, and more for your towns that may or may not exist anymore. This is Archive Grid, and it's free to use. Archive Grid contains listings of manuscripts, photographs, documents, and sometimes newspapers or newspaper articles. You can search the entire collection at one time, and I actually successfully did that. You can also search by state. Sometimes materials end up far from where they started out. And so at times it really is nice to be able to do that whole system search. Um, you can search by location, by name, event, topic, business, organization, whatever. So I advise you to just experiment like crazy with the search strings. I decided to start with Nevada, and here are the 5 participating archives located in Nevada. And my little red arrow is pointing towards UNLV. So it shows you that there are 4 other institutions that I can look through to see if they have anything further that will add to my history of the family and the town. Let's see. There is a town today still known as Blue Diamond. It is nearby, but the original Blue Diamond Village with the company houses up on the bluff where the schoolhouse was is gone. The mine operation expanded and shifted, and that place is no more. In the memorial book about my dad and my uncle, Ray Phelps drew a map of the original village, and that is how I know that his family and mine were next door neighbors. It was really cool to see that map. This is the archive grid description of the mine records we saw at the UNLV site earlier. Archive grid also provides maps to where the collections are physically located, which is nice. And there's a great description right here of the Blue Diamond Mine and what this collection is about. We'll talk more about resources later. We've talked a bit about types of towns. Now let us consider the many reasons a town may no longer exist. There are natural disasters, economic disasters, unnatural disasters, meaning man-made, progress. And the reason I have a question mark there is change is not always progress, but that is how it is often marketed to us. Relocation. Towns have often moved, lock, stock, and barrel, as they say. Renaming. Sometimes the town is still there, but under a different name. And annexation. Sometimes a town becomes part of a larger entity through annexation. So let's talk about each one of those just a little, further. Well, first, let me say that, why does this matter? Well, it matters because the more you can learn about the places your ancestors lived, the more you'll know about their lives, both opportunities and challenges. So let's start out by defining these disasters and reasons. Natural disasters. We've got floods, flash floods, rivers changing course. You've got to think that the first town to be done in any spot. They may find out reasons why that's not a good place to be living, and so some towns really did have to move to survive. That fire and wildfires, storms, tornadoes, hurricanes, thunderstorms, hail, blizzards, prolonged drought, heat waves, landslides, mudslides, earthquakes, tsunamis, believe it or not. Alaska has lost several towns to tsunamis, just washing them away. Avalanches, crickets and grasshoppers and other insect problems, loss of a potable water source, disease has sometimes just come through and eliminated a lot of the population, loss of food supply, and then There's also coastal destruction and loss of islands and barrier islands due to erosion and subsidence or sinking, especially of a lot of our East Coast islands that were glacially formed. Now, check out this map, which shows the extent of the 1874 Rocky Mountain locust plague. This plague extended into 1875 and actually into as late as 1877 in some locations. This attack included the northern part of Texas, Indian Territory, which will become Oklahoma, and all of Kansas, also the western portions of Missouri, Iowa, and Minnesota, and the eastern portion of Wyoming, Montana, Nebraska, and the Dakota Territory. This attack also extended north well into Canada. The Rocky Mountains apparently stopped it on the west side. So all of these areas lost their crops, which means their living and their ability to pay taxes on their land, their food, and the feed for their livestock. These locusts ate fabric and leather as well. Dead locusts fouled water supplies. Train travel was impaired as locomotives could not gain enough traction to start or stop safely on tracks covered with locusts. Many of these areas lost population as settlers were forced to return to family in the East just to survive. In its glory years, Midco, which was named after the company that started the town, was a thriving boom town and the largest city in Carter County, Missouri. It was abandoned less than 3 years after being devastated by both the 1918 influenza pandemic and the loss of a lot of their business when World War II or World War I ended. The picture on the left was Midco when it was thriving, and the picture on the right about all that is left of it today. At the outbreak of World War I, the US government demanded that a modern chemical plant be installed at Midco. You can see up here that Midco comes from the Mid-Continent Iron Company name. They wanted the byproducts coming from the wood as it was being converted to charcoal, byproducts such as wood alcohol, tar, calcium acetate, and other wood oils. Thus, in addition to the ironworks, Midco became the site of a sprawling chemical plant. The global flu pandemic of 1918 through 1920 hit the community of Midco, in some cases wiping out whole families. At its peak, there were 2 crews digging graves day and night, full time. It's not really known how many victims are buried in the Midco Cemetery, as only 6 of them have tombstones. With the end of World War I, there was no longer any demand for the products the company was producing, and so in 1921, the Mid-Continent Iron Company closed. With the closing of the plant, the people moved away, and by 1930, Midco was nearly a ghost town. Little remains to show that what was once the largest town in Carter County even existed. So that's just how volatile some of these early towns were, you know, easy come, easy go, they say. Let's talk about economic disaster. You could have a disaster such as a mine flooding and having a lack of sufficient pumping equipment to keep it dry enough to work in, inefficient smelters to handle the ore coming out, and maybe the natural resources were depleted. Mines eventually play out, and trees are gone. They're either logged out or destroyed by wildfires. There could be a loss of a major industry in a town that either moved or went out of business. Production facilities burned. There was a lot of fires back then because there was basically no way to stop them. They would generally turn into a major conflagration. Sometimes a town becomes uninhabitable due to pollution of land, air, or water. Roadways and available economical transportation might not be sufficient to move all the goods they're producing, or they might be just non-existent. Sometimes a new highway or a railroad comes along and bypasses the town. So they'd have a loss of a business patronage and also a loss of a way to ship their goods to other locations. Railroads remove spur lines at times. Were depressions all through the history of the United States, economic downturn on the local, state, or national level, and strikes and labor union issues eventually cropped up. Employers sometimes cut wages when they weren't making as much, and people sometimes just couldn't live on that amount of money and moved to the city. Especially young people tended to move to cities for opportunities that were coming there as more factories and so on were built. Let's talk about one little town in Marianna in Lee County, Arkansas, which was saved from economic disaster by a move. In 1848, Walnut Ridge was founded on the Longueuil River in Monroe County, Arkansas. In 1852, it was renamed Marianna. In 1857, they moved 3 miles south, all of them, the whole thing, to the final location, which was on higher ground and where the river was navigable year-round. This made the difference, and they became a regional shipping hub connected to the Mississippi, whereas the town would have gone to nothing if they hadn't moved. So, we sometimes wonder all the reasons why our ancestors moved. Some of them are really interesting. In 1873, Lee County was formed, and Marianna has been the county seat ever since. So it's a significant town. All right, let's talk about unnatural disasters, aka man-made. Some of these happen because of government actions. Government has used eminent domain in many ways to obtain land that it wanted. Sometimes they did a condemnation of land or facilities. Sometimes it was for an area they wanted to use for road building, an area where they wanted to build a dam, and the creation of the reservoirs behind the dam caused flooding that eliminated towns. There were creation of military installations, and sometimes improper dam construction or maintenance led to towns below the dam being flooded out as well. Okay, sometimes there was industrial pollution of air, water, soil, and crops. There loss of property due to mine expansion, loss of jobs if the company finds a better mine or manufacturing location elsewhere. One famous unnatural disaster in the US is the overplowing by farmers, then the loss of topsoil, which gave us the Dust Bowl. Uncontrolled lawlessness was often a problem. Proper government not yet been established. People would move out and start to build a town, and the government would have to catch up with them. Improper mine construction that causes collapses or flood, or the lack of safety protocols or failure to follow those that were established could cause a mine to totally collapse and be unusable. And then there were homestead issues. This isn't talked about a lot, but immigrants would come into the United States. They would sign up for a homestead, but since they didn't really know anything about the land here, sometimes the land they received was very dissimilar to the land that they were farming in where they came from, in the country where they came from. And so they really didn't know how to farm the kind of crops that would work out well there. Sometimes the land they received had no actual water source on it. So if there wasn't a sufficient amount of rainfall, big problem. So things like that happened. All right, here's a quick look at the Dust Bowl. Now I want to tell you about Wasp, Wheat, and Willow Grove, Tennessee. Wasp started out as Warm Springs, but shortened, I don't know, on maps or on signs, it was shortened to WA-SP and eventually was known simply as Wasp. So I was afraid that they had a bad problem with wasps there when I heard the name originally. So that was a good thing that wasn't true. It was a community located in Cocke County on the eastern edge of the state. In the 1930s, the United States Forest Service purchased Wasp and its surrounding homesteads as part of an initiative to restore the Wolf Creek watershed, which had been logged out, and the community was completely abandoned due to this government buyout. Now let's talk about wheat. Wheat is Roane County. It was named Bald Hill from 1846 to 1880, and then wheat from 1880 to 1942. Wheat was purchased for the Manhattan Project. In Tennessee, there were several areas purchased for to build sites to process uranium and prepare it for its eventual use in the bombs. So wheat was originally a farming area. Um, the community of wheat was completely dissolved and the residents displaced when the government project moved in. And most of that site remains in federal government ownership, managed by the United States Department of Energy to this very day. Now we're going to talk about Willow Grove. Willow Grove existed from 1795 to 1942. It was the second largest town in Clay County and is now behind Dale Hollow Dam and underneath Dale Hollow Reservoir. This is a look at Willow Grove just before the flood. And this is a look at the schoolhouse, which can still be seen today from above. One of the townsfolk, believe it or not, is still buried in the concrete under the front steps of the school. Let's talk about progress. Get a drink. Mechanization of farming, farm machinery, meant there were less workers needed to work the same amount of land. The same thing happened in many other industries, making less workers needed to accomplish the job. Sometimes in the course of technological development, one raw material replaced another in the manufacturing process, and this may have caused the manufacturing to change locations. The invention of cars and trucks meant there were no need for so many small farm towns. Farm towns used to be about every 10 miles apart because 10 miles was about as far as a horse and wagon could manage there and back again in a day. Railroad water stop towns, which were about every 20 miles apart, those were no longer needed, all of those, after the conversion to oil power and diesel. And smaller places were often annexed into larger places. So many small town areas are now inside larger cities. We'll talk more about that. Now let's talk about relocation. Sometimes a town moved to allow mine expansion. It moved to escape river or coastal flooding, as I said, to avoid landslides or avalanches. Island towns often end up moving businesses and buildings to shore towns due to erosion and the subsuming of the land. And towns sometimes follow the railroad or highway so as not to face abandonment. They would just pick up and move a few miles over to where the railroad was going to pass. Now, this is the Minnopedia, the Encyclopedia of Minnesota, and this is an article on the relocation of Hibbing, Minnesota. You can see it took place between 1919 and 1921. The Minnopedia is a resource for reliable information about significant people, places, events, and things in Minnesota history. And one of the great things is that most of the states have started something like this, where they're posting collections and photos and history and information that we can just look through at our own leisure. Now, as I said, from 1919 to 1921 was when the move occurred. And the people of Hibbing moved nearly 200 structures, including several large buildings like the church and the other major building that you see here. 2 miles south to make way for a growing open pit mine. The Oliver Iron Mining Company wanted the valuable iron ore that was underneath North Hibbing at that point. And the company funded the use of horses, logs, farm tractors. And what you see here is a steam crawler That was a tractor primarily used in the logging industry, but it was very useful in moving the larger structures. And also, the company also helped furnish steel and steel cables and human power to relocate the entire town. So in this case, Hibbing did not change names, but did change locations. Can you imagine what it was like to see your church going down the road on one day? Now, this was Woodstock, Colorado in 1884, right after the town was flattened in seconds by a major avalanche. It was never rebuilt due to the realization that they had located it in a very avalanche prone terrain area. Yeah, that would make me not want to rebuild. Of course, there was some loss of life there. All right, let's talk about renaming. So sometimes towns were renamed to honor someone or something important or historic. Sometimes it was to eliminate a duplicate name. Let's talk about the post office rules. The US postal rules were that there could only be one post office by a given name in each state. Often, when a town was incorporating and receiving the opportunity for a post office, it was found that another town of the same name already had the post office with that name. And many times, towns took this opportunity at this point um, so they could have a post office and renamed so they could have a post office with the same name as the town. Many places were often originally named for people, and sometimes people fall out of favor politically or committed crimes or something. And then sometimes names were eliminated. Town names were changed to eliminate a name that had become inappropriate or embarrassing somehow. Let's talk about a couple of examples here. There was a place called Jernigan, Mosquito County, Florida, which was renamed to Orlando, Orange County, Florida. Doesn't that sound like a more fun place to visit? It turned out that Aaron Jernigan and his family, who were the original settlers, turned out to be a very notorious bunch and pulled a whole lot of shenanigans. And therefore, the name change was necessary. Sometimes here's a renaming example. In 1840, Trace, Tennessee was started. In 1889, it was renamed Spivey. And in the early 1900s, it was renamed Hermitage Springs, Tennessee, when it became a spa town. There were warm springs there. And Hermitage Springs sounds a lot cooler than Spivey, I think, if you were looking for a restful place. Now, here's an interesting example of something that occurred. The pronunciation of Berlin, New Hampshire was changed to Berlin instead of Berlin during World War I as a patriotic stand against Germany. Um, I've actually been looking into this as a study, and there was quite a number of towns who changed their name or maybe the pronunciation during this time. Let's talk about annexation. Cities often grow in population and wish to include more land. Smaller towns often cooperate with this idea due to the advantages of being part of a larger city with more services, better schools, more shopping. Sometimes a smaller place was attached to a larger place, and many small town areas are now inside larger cities. It was interesting when I started looking at the stories of ghost towns, and I found some of them in the middle of Dallas, Texas, so on. Seattle is a good example, and Putnam is another. We'll talk about those just briefly here. So this is the Seattle Municipal Archives educational section on annexation. Sometimes we wonder about the distinct areas or neighborhoods in the various areas of a city that we're familiar with. Each area may actually represent a historic town or a neighbor or ethnic neighborhood or something from the past. And so that's interesting to look into the history of a larger city and find out what really went on. Seattle annexed 8 small municipalities and 2 unincorporated parcels between 1905 and 1910 and just doubled the size of the city. Here's this map here that you see that I put up that I found. The red arrow is pointing to the 1869. That section there was the original portion of Seattle. On either side of that, you can see pieces added in 1883 and then 1891. And then the rest of it is the things added between 1905 and 1910 is in this list over here. So that was really interesting thing. Now, there are records of all of this held by the archives that I mentioned, and they have an online exhibit of some things currently. This is an interactive annexation map that they created, and there it was a project of the Seattle Municipal Archives, and I've really enjoyed studying it. You can watch how things developed over the course of time there. Let's talk about Putnam, Muskingum County for a second. In 1800, a town began by the name of Springfield. In 1814, it was renamed Putnam. And between that time and 1872, Muskingum, Ohio, the city, made several attempts to annex Zanesville or annex Putnam to Zanesville. Putnam finally gave in 1872. But when you go through Zanesville, if you didn't know any of this, there's a historic section of Zanesville called the Putnam Historic District. And it turns out that if you go to that historic district, you can see some of Putnam, which is still there. Putnam is now recognized as having been a major stop on the Underground Railroad, so it has a really fascinating history of itself, of its own. So we've talked now about what can happen to a town and about ways to locate even those that are gone without a trace. Here's some other considerations. Could it be spelled incorrectly? Maybe it was recorded phonetically. Did your ancestors have an accent or a brogue when they came over? Are you sure you're looking in the correct county, state, etc.? There are so many places in the United States with the same name. It's amazing. Could the name have changed over time? You remember we talked about the post office rules. Did the place have a nickname? Believe it or not, I have a whole book of nicknames of cities in the United States that I came across. So that happened a lot too. And what clues do you have? Do you have a name or a possible name? Do you know approximately when your family was there? You may be able to use census records to narrow that down. Um, various areas of the United States were settled by other countries first, actually, all of it. and and there were various immigrant groups from other countries. Sometimes the place names are a clue to the origin of the people who started the town. Do you know why they started the town? Did your ancestor follow a particular profession? Did he or she speak English? Ethnic towns and neighborhoods were very common. And here's a major clue. Naming places after where they came from was a very common thing to do. So any town that starts with new is a good clue that you found a place where this is going on. So this might help you to track backwards to where they came from. Did they mention the name of any local geographic features like mountains, rivers, creeks, caves, mesas, um, coastal bays, or something that could be a help in pinpointing a location? Um, it would be helpful if you could find out, like I said, who formed the town and why. What was the economic basis? Was it lumbering, manufacturing, mining, farming, ranching? Was it on a river, canal, or a stagecoach route? So they did a lot of shipping. When did this happen? So you'll want to try to determine the years of the town's existence. Was it ever incorporated? Was there a post office? If so, what were the years of operation and the date of its closure? There's a lot of postal records that exist where you can figure things like that out. And also, it's usually in the histories of little towns. These are the sorts of things you may be able to learn from a county or local history book, a city directory, or a gazetteer. Okay, let's take a look at resources provided by Family Search. Um, we'll look at the Family Search catalog, the Family Search books, the Family Search wiki a little bit here. Whatever we don't cover, be sure and go back and check yourself. Now, I went to the wiki and actually chose United States Research as my choice there. And when you get to the home page of that United States Wiki topics, um, one of the background topics that you can look into is history. And so I did that. And here you see you can choose among the states for zeroing in more on the history of each state. So I actually chose Minnesota as an example. And you can see that there are 6 links. The first thing that shows up are online resources that I can use immediately. So I have 6 resources I can go to right off the top. Let's see what we can find. The first one is I won't show another example of that because I've already showed you the Minipedia article on the move of Hibbing. So you know what that is like. And most states, like I said, have something like that now. This is the All Minnesota County History Name Index, which was the second link. It's an ancestry database. And remember that you can usually use Ancestry at a public library free of charge, and you can always access it free at a family search center. So I conducted a search for the surname Noyes, it's spelled Noyes. And you can see here that I found a number of hits plus additional hits for variant spellings. The index shows the name, abbreviated title of the book, the publication year, and the page number. So even if you can't get your hands on a copy of the book, you could request copies of a page or two, whatever you need to get that history about the town or the family that you're after. Or you could do an interlibrary loan from an institution that owns a copy. Now, how do I really know all the sources I've just checked using this index? This is really imperative that you know what an index is covering so you know what you just searched. So below the search window, Ancestry provides the list of collection contents here, and that's what this slide is showing you. So I can quickly look through this, see which counties are covered and which books. And so that is really helpful. And luckily for me, there are several areas covered here of interest for me in Minnesota. Now, the next link is for Minnesota History 1655 to 1904, volumes 1 through 4. This is another ancestry database. So are you noticing the value of the Family Search Wiki itself, giving us all these clues to databases and sources that exist elsewhere besides just on Family Search? So that's amazing. Um, then I decided to see if I could find that book anywhere else, and I did a Google search and found Hattie Trust has a copy of that book that is free to search and download. And if you haven't tried Hattie Trust, I really recommend it. It's a place where you can read books online for free and sometimes even download them. Here we are back at the link list to look at the last 3 sources. The very next one we'll go to is County and Town Histories, which includes biographies as well. So the County and Town Histories link leads to this website, learnwebskills.com, provided by the DAR and the SAR, that's Daughters of American Revolution, Sons of, to help those who wish to apply for membership, but it's just loaded with helpful tutorials and anyone can use them. Now, right here, you see the word links as something we can click on. And this is just the top of the list of links for tutorials and information. And if you go down that list, you will see the link to County and Town Histories. Now, let me say that the family search link would have taken us straight to the county and town histories. In fact, the list is in 3 parts, and we have been dropped into part 2, I through N, which is where Minnesota would be found alphabetically. Iowa is right here at the top of the list, though, so we'll just go ahead and look at that for a minute. The numbers that you see after the name of each county are the publication years for the various histories available here. What's really wonderful to notice is that almost all but one of these has at least 2, if not 3 or 4 links for county histories that we can look at. And so you might be able to compare the listings between volumes and maybe determine when your town came and went, where your ancestors came and went to that town. So it's loaded with, this website is loaded with lots of great resources. Now, the family search, let's see here. Here we go. So on there, I didn't have a Minnesota or an Iowa one to look up right that second. So I looked up to see if they had any volumes on Walworth County in Wisconsin, where I have relatives. My mother was from Wisconsin. And I found a listing for the Prindle-Wally family. Notice I did a search inside here. This is how Internet Archive works. And then it put the search, the results of my search over here. There turned out to be just one page. And it tells you what page number. And if you just click on that, it takes you to it. So all of a sudden you're looking at, here I'm looking at the John Prindle, who married Cornelia Wally, and they were both from New York, but interestingly, they ended up, this account says that they were married in Massachusetts, and then they came west, and it gives loads of information about all these places they lived. I was never quite certain when the different Wally families moved from New York and where they lived along the way, so this was very helpful. Now I have additional locations to check. The next link was for Explore Minnesota. It says here, and I ran onto this story about the Moose Lake Depot and Fires of 1918 Museum. When I found out about the fires of 1918, or they're sometimes called the Cloquet Fire episode, it was the largest natural disaster in Minnesota history and the second largest fire disaster in U.S. history. This episode is often called the Forgotten Fire because World War I was at its climax and the influenza pandemic at its height when this fire took place in October 1918 and distracted from this terrible tragedy. It turns out that over 250,000 acres were burned. 52,000 people were affected in that area, and there were over 1,000 fatalities. 38 communities were completely destroyed. Some of them rebuilt, some of them didn't. At this link, I located a link to further information about, and it comes from the Minnesota Digital Library. So that's another place you can look for information. These things, like I say, they're cropping up all around the U.S. So for me, this was the bonus round. So I actually got 7 links for Minnesota research there. I always look at the end of the articles and things to see if there are links to other resources. The last of those 6 links on Minnesota, it was for the Minnesota Historical Society website. And you can see the wonderful things they have there. They have Minnesota People Records. They have collections, digital newspapers, Minnesota History Magazine, the Minipedia, archaeology even. So lots of good links here. There's another look at some of their offerings. And here you can see their publications, and the Minnesota History Magazine. A lot of times on these historical society sites, they will post indexes to their to the already posted magazines or quarterlies that they put out. And so you can search, and sometimes they will usually have the magazine itself up to a certain date maybe up until the last 5 years or so, actually available online. So you can get a lot of good information that way. And then, of course, once again, the Minipedia here. Another resource for locating information is Cindy's List. Topic I would use would be United States state level records repositories. These are the kind of places that have collections of county histories and other things of interest that would help you about the counties and towns. So here you see the list for Michigan. There's 6 links there to start with, and the even longer list for my home state of California. So lots of good things to research there. This is WorldCat, the world's largest library catalog, and it's free to use. I did a search for Blue Diamond, Nevada, to see what kind of what records that I already found would show up here, and also if there was anything that I hadn't seen yet. So let me just mention that, by the way, you must add Nevada when Google searching Blue Diamond, unless you want to look at an amazing number of ads for Blue Diamond almonds. Ask me how I know that. You can see listings for the collections at UNLV, the history committee stuff, and the Blue Diamond Mine records, the corporation records. Whoops. I wondered what other material I might be able to locate. Well, look what I located. I located the Blue Diamond Heritage Cookbook, a timeless treasure of tidbits and tastes prepared for you. Oh, I'd love to get my hands on a copy of that. And another book that I located here, or I should say it's a government publication actually, and a lot of those are available free of charge at Internet Archive as well. But this one's called The Methods and Costs of Mining and Crushing Gypsum at the Mine of the Blue Diamond Corporation Limited in Arden. That was the earlier name for the Blue Diamond area. So I looked and saw that this was for 1932, which is exactly when my grandfather was working there. And you can also see that it says here, access free. Yahoo. Free, the best 4-letter word ever. Okay. So here are some additional stuff that I found. The Blue Diamond Adobe, which turns out to be a history of the earliest buildings in the area. Whoops. Yeah, let's try that again. All right. In Search of Blue Diamond, which was done by a local historian named Kim Gary. I've read other works by Kim about that area. And the Vanishing Village, which is by a more recent resident of the town. I wanted to show you, I clicked on the Vanishing Village so you can see what it looks like when you can see the details of a WorldCat listing. So one of the things you see here is it'll tell you what all the formats and editions of this work have been. So you can find out if it's only in print, if there's an ebook version available, that kind of stuff. And then over here, I can see even a couple places where I might buy a reasonable copy of that and for how much money. And here it says, find a copy at a library, that there are 2 editions in 10 libraries. The libraries are listed by proximity to my location. The top 2 in the list are showing here. So UNLV, not surprising. And Nevada State Library and Archives is the second one. And it literally says that the UNLV is 342 miles from my house right here. And it says the State Library, which is in Carson, is 436 miles from my current location. Okay, so that's super helpful. Now, if there's a library close enough, I hop in the car. If not, I can proceed to do an interlibrary loan. In fact, that's one of the main points of this mega catalog, is to help us all be able to find where the things we really need to use are located and make arrangements to do so. Now, before I ever do an interlibrary loan, though, guess what? I always check Internet Archive. And guess what? I found a copy of Vanishing Village that I can search and read online at the Internet Archive. Woohoo. I always check there first. And guess what? I'm a far ways into the book already. It's interesting. Now, let's talk about some further location resources, historical gazetteers and maps. Um, historical some thoughts in this department are historical gazetteers of the United States. They will generally have sections for each state or territory. Historical gazetteers of the state of choice and or the county. Maps and lists of towns located in county histories. And while working with these records, just keep in mind that you'll have to watch the publication dates of these books and the formation dates of the states and counties and the fact that their boundaries were subject to change. Yeah. I want to share three more examples of online resources in the geographical area. The Newberry Library, Atlas of Historical County Boundaries, mapsofus.org, and more items from the Family Search Wiki. The home of this project is the Atlas of Historical County Boundaries, which is located at the Newberry Library in Chicago. At this row, you will find a tutorial and more information about the project. And from this map, you can pick a state and delve further into specific data. For each state, there is a full set of information as well as the interactive maps. There are more links than you can see here. For Iowa, this is just the top of the links list. And I'd like to focus on a few of these. You'll want to go back and see what the other links are available are all about. All right, so there's the link to interactive maps, an index of counties and equivalents. What they mean by equivalents is that in Louisiana, they're parishes, and in Alaska, they're boroughs. Here you can view individual county chronologies. We'll talk about that. And here you can view the bibliography and sources that were used to put this website together. Here we are at the animated maps of Iowa county formation. In the box at the left side of the screen, choose the date of the map you would like to view. And what we're looking at is August 1846. We're looking at Iowa territory. Here we are in late December of the same year, 1846, just after Iowa became a state. Notice that all of Iowa territory did not end up in Iowa, and also that you could hover over any parts of this map and pop-ups. A pop-up box will come up with information about that area or county, where you can find out more information about it at that time. Now we're back to the Iowa detail page and on to the index of counties and equivalents. What I wanted you to notice here is that not all counties that were created still exist. You see there are tiny notations at some of these counties. Some of them are now listed as extinct. Well, let's look at an example of that. Here's Risley County. Risley is now extinct. It came about in 1851, but in 1853 lost all territory to the creation of Webster County, in which it was included. So this county no longer exists, but there were 2 years when there were Risley County records kept. So one of the things you may have to do when you come across an extinct county in your pathway is to check with the state library and archives to find out where those records are now located. In this case, I would guess that they are located in Webster County since it took over all of their territory, but that's not always the case. Okay. Now we're looking at we're we're looking at the individual county chronologies. Some of my Iowa ancestors lived in Pottawatomie County from about 1846 to 1852. This chart helps me to see what jurisdictions may be involved. In fact, when they arrived in 1846, there was no Pottawatomie County, so I have to keep that in mind when I'm doing my research. And then the county was formed, and some of my ancestors lived in Dubuque County, and some lived in Marshall County. These charts will tell you when each county was formed and from what territory or other counties it was derived. They also cover changes made as boundaries were adjusted and counties came and went. You know, sometimes it was folks in Washington that were sitting there, you know, whacking up the maps, and they didn't know that there was a river or a mountain range or something that made that was very inconvenient, and that's why sometimes the boundaries were adjusted to take into consideration these geographical situations. There are even charts for what are termed non-county areas, and so that would be the areas which have not yet been officially organized. Now, the bibliography lists offer ideas and resources for further research. For Iowa, there are 9 full pages of bibliography. What you see here are snippets from a couple of those pages. So there's all kinds, sometimes it lists county histories, map books, who knows, but it's always worth looking at. The next resource is mapofus.org. This is a wonderful website. I think I'm kind of a map geek or a mapaholic or something, but it can be searched by state and includes interactive maps as well as standard historic maps. So that's really cool. So of course I went to Iowa, and here's where the link would be to the list of interactive maps for Iowa, which we're going to look at here. This is Iowa. This is what their interactive maps look like. And this is Iowa in 1816. That little tiny red HO there shows the formation of Iowa's first county, Howard, in 1816. Yes, it is huge. And that is something to keep in mind. Early counties were generally huge and were cut down as more population arrived and divided. And so your ancestor may have lived in the same place, but been in several different counties because of all this division of areas that was going on. Something to keep in mind. All right. And so below the maps, what you saw a little bit of there was this is the choice of maps you have for the era in which Iowa's counties were forming. And the reason there's not one for every year is there are only maps for when there was a change in the counties or a change in the boundaries. So that's kind of helpful. If you're trying to track your family between a couple of, certain dates, you can click back and forth on these maps and look at what was going on and see where, the county lines may have changed and so on. There's also a map for each of the years of the census up through 1930. And this down here is the list of abbreviations. The big list here is for the county names that are being used. And then there's a short list at the front of other terminology they're using in these maps. So this is the 1841 county formation map, and you can see that some of the counties are smaller now, but the rest, these 4 here that have been created, extend the full length of the state at this point, and they won't end up that way because Iowa had something like 100 counties. So eventually these will all be chopped up. Iowa has fairly squarish county shapes overall. So your ancestors that may have lived in these areas that were settled later, they're the ones that are going to have their county names most likely change. Here we are at the Family Search Wiki again, and you select North America, scroll down to the United States, or choose a state. Here we are at the U.S. General section again, and you can choose a state from this map here. But notice that these categories here, maps, gazetteers, and historical geography, you can read about the general things about the state in this location. And usually at each one of these places, they have a list of the estates, and then you can peel off and go into the greater detail on your specific area. Okay, so we're talking about gazetteers at the moment. Um, a gazetteer, if we define it, is an index or dictionary of places, not an atlas. This is helpful because you can search for a place without knowing exactly where it is or was. For our purposes, you're looking for historical gazetteers, meaning those that were published during the life and times of your ancestors. So it will be a list of things as they were at that time. So once again, you need to watch the publication dates to make sure you're using a gazetteer for the correct time period. Now, I'm not going to go through all of this material here, but it's some of the stuff that was a little more detail about gazetteers that was available there under when I was on the US research page. And one thing it does say here, though, is that gazetteers, in addition to, the locations of towns and things that we're interested in, they may also contain listings of geographical formations such as mountains, rivers, and bays. And that's why if you have a clue, if they mentioned, oh, yes, we live by the such and such creek or whatever, that might be helpful for pinning down where the town is located. They also tend to mention methods of transportation in the area and infrastructure, such as dams or harbors or railroad lines, that kind of thing. So sometimes they even give you population details and longitude and latitude. You never know. I've seen a whole lot of different gazetteers, and they have their own uniqueness, and sometimes you get the most wonderful little bits of information. So you'll want to look, keep an eye out for that. Now, I chose New Mexico for our example here. And one thing I wanted to mention was the very top link here. See, they start out with the first section is online gazetteers. Yay, that's the stuff we can start in on right away. And then here are the print-only gazetteers down towards the bottom. But the very first link, and I assume it's the first link in every list for every state, is Family Search Places. And that's just a little feature they have to help you learn more about places that you might want to check out. But what I selected for us to look at here was is where my little red arrow is pointing. It's the link for McKinney's Business Directory for 1882 and 83, which contains information about California, Arizona, New Mexico, Southern Colorado, and Kansas. This is not unusual in the West, especially at the time when it was, the population was way lower than a lot of the states back east, for them to do sort of regional business directories or regional gazetteers. And so, yeah, don't shy away from those just because they have multiple states in them. Now, this is looking interesting to me, so I'll click on the link. And guess what? It took me straight to a link at Internet Archive. And you already know how I can search inside there. And this particular one, I could actually download too. The things that are out of copyright, you can a lot of times download a copy if you'd like to have one. So that's kind of really fun. When you're at the homepage of Internet Archive, which is what you're looking at here, you can search for more gazetteers with the search strings listed here, among others. U.S. State Gazetteer, United States Gazetteer, Gazetteer of the United States. You have to try the words in different orders because who knows how they are in the title. And then you could try gazetteer of and just fill in the blank on the state or the county you're interested in, because there are a lot of gazetteers that were done on the state and county level. Or you could say places in. I've seen books, there's a lot of books been done that are supposedly a full listing of all the places that have ever been in a particular state. And that's, if that's how they're listed rather than with the word gazetteer, fine, So be creative with your search strings there. Now, in your syllabus, you will find a list I created of U.S. historical gazetteers published between 1795 and 1884. I only included those that are available to read and search online and which can be downloaded at Internet Archive. When a gazetteer is for the whole United States, it includes sections for each state or territory. And once again, just a reminder that comparing the various years available may help you determine when your town came and went or changed names. And a quick look at the fact that there are some of these gazetteers that exist for, here's for the towns of Colorado, a handbook. And this is Hampshire County, Massachusetts, and Greene County, New York. And all of these are just free and sitting there at Internet Archive. Now we'll finish with a quick word about newspaper searching and sources. One thing I want to stress is when you're searching newspapers, you've got to do it a lot of different ways to make sure you're not missing anything. So, of course, you'll search for the family names, the surnames, and then you'll search for the town name in papers. Most of our little towns, they probably won't have a newspaper, probably didn't have one. So what you'll be doing is using newspapers from the nearby larger town, and you'll be looking for all the mentions of that particular town in those newspapers. I can't stress this enough. When I was searching for information about my family in Clark County, Nevada, I increased my success by searching for all the mentions of the Werner and Miller surnames, plus any mentions of Blue Diamond and Arden, jurisdictions I knew were important, and it really paid off. I have really found out a lot about that area. So here you see on the left side or the right side of the screen, a chart of small cities and towns near Las Vegas. I just Googled for that, and by goodness, there was one. So um, what I was looking for was towns that were bigger than Blue Diamond, but not Las Vegas. So I found three. Blue Diamond is number 4 in this list right here. And the three that are bigger are Searchlight, Moapa, and Indian Springs. So now I can check to see if they had newspapers of their own and might have had any mentions. You know how in newspapers back then, they reported things from places all around to fill up their space. So you never know. This is Chronicling America at the Library of Congress website. You should be using this as it is free and guess what? Your taxes were used to create it, so you might as well. Um, Here you can search America's historic newspapers that they have collected from 1756 to 1963, depending on the paper. It's not everything that's out there, but this is what they've been able to digitize thus far. This project is still in motion. And the other thing you could click on from this page is right here. It's the US newspaper directory from 1690 to the present. Notice that this listing says US newspaper directory, but it begins in 1690. And we know the US didn't really begin until 1776 or beyond. So this will include colonial newspapers as well. This is the single most comprehensive listing of newspapers published in the United States, or what would become the United States, and probably always will be. So there's a lot more newspapers listed here than you can actually search the pages of the present. But let me just show you. This, if you click on that directory, this is where it takes you, and you can look up newspapers just by title. If you just have a title of a newspaper, you can select states. You know, there's ways of focusing this search down. So be sure and take advantage of that. What I want you to see is what one of the, yeah, there it is. This is what actually, if you find a newspaper and you just want to learn about the newspaper, when you do that search on the title, I pulled up the link uh, for the Las Vegas Age. And you can see here they have a picture of what the newspaper looked like. They talk about the dates of publication, the frequency of it, which is very helpful to know. So it was a weekly, and uh, and there's other notes. There's descriptive information over here. If I click, there's the rest of the page on it. You might be able to find out something about who has holdings of this newspaper and when was the first and last issue and that sort of thing. Now, I wanted you to be aware that a new and updated version of this site will be released in August of this year, 2025. And if when you go to this website, you'll see this red banner across the top, and it has a couple of links where you can click in and find out about what the new version of it will look like and what kind of features and tools it will have. And they really did need an update. And so I'm glad they're doing it. And I'm looking forward to what the new one will have to offer. There are also state newspaper projects. All 50 states are now participating in the National Digital Newspaper Project. I think it was New Hampshire that was the last one on board. And they have their own state project pages as well. And all of the newspapers they have on the state pages are not necessarily up online yet on the Chronicling America website, just so you know. So I like to go to those. Plus, if you're really interested in a particular state, it's nice to use their search engine that they created for their own newspapers. So other important newspaper locations that you will want to check are some states have collections at major universities, the state library and state archives, the state historical and genealogical societies. And you want to not forget to check local libraries, historical and genealogical societies as well. Sometimes they have that little newspaper that nobody else knows about or something. And so you want to make sure you don't miss anything or something, or maybe they've created an index to it that will prove useful. And let me just recommend that you use any pay newspaper website when you get a chance. You get a chance at those if you're at Family History Center, sometimes local libraries, and for sure if you go to BYU or Salt Lake, they've got more of those pay newspaper websites, so they're wonderful. All right. This is the Ancestor Hunt website. I'd love you to check out the free newspaper links here. Currently, there are over 85,500 free newspaper links. And I just checked that total yesterday. So that's really something worth checking out. So you could see where newspapers show up here. There are also many more free genealogy links on the site for all different kinds of collections of things. He started out with newspapers, but it has expanded to all different kinds of things like city directories and maps and gazetteers and things like that. So you don't want to miss this website. Right here under tips and techniques at the top of the right side, it tells you that there are over 3,000 articles and many including actionable tips and techniques to improve your newspaper and other research. And down here you can see there's also webinars and books that he's put together. So yeah, just do yourself a favor and have a look at that. Yeah, okay, there's the little arrows, I forgot. So thanks for being with me today. And I'm looking forward to you saying, Eureka, I found it. Thanks. If there's any questions, let me know now and I'll do my best to answer them.
Wow. What a remarkable collection of information, Laurie. Let me share with you one or two comments from online. On Facebook, we had Carolina or Carolina from Germany
Oh,
watching, spending her Saturday evening online with us. Uh, uh, Christy Lee mentioned, thank you, Laurie, for this informative presentation and the great handout. We did not have any specific questions
okay.
beyond those comments. I have one comment. I in my German research, this applies in a more difficult way to U.S. Records, but I ran across some censuses that were done in Württemberg, for example, where it was really helpful to see these small villages that were later swallowed up by the adjoining larger towns as they expanded. Like you mentioned that,
Yes,
but
I've
the
seen that.
census was a great way in Germany was a way to do that. It's sad that the German census doesn't list names of individuals; it just lists numbers.
Well, it
But
depends on which kingdom you're in, how those censuses look there.
that too,
Yeah.
right. But that was a handy way for me to uh, learn more details about those localities. A little sidelight on the Württemberg census. It also listed uh, the membership in various churches that existed in those, and so that gives you a hint as to what church records to look in
Mhm.
for the people in that particular small town or village. Anyway,
Myers Gazetteer contains information like that too, and that Myers Gaz website is absolutely fabulous. I have noticed a lot of that in my German research that there are, as I try to go back, looking at a more modern map, but eventually you figure out that pieces of that town were other little towns that have been annexed in and become part of it. You see these roads. I love it when they have a road by the name of a town because that was the road from that city to that other town going out of town.
that's fairly common. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I have been able to use that to my own advantage too. And nowadays it seems like the Germans are doing a lot of that combination stuff to better use their money as far as, oh, like fire and water services and, municipal
Yeah.
stuff. They band together in these little communities or, and so it's interesting to see. Sometimes you can see, that the combined name contains both of the previous names. So you pretty much know that at some point they got together. So yeah, there's so much about this locating place names, but and it's just so crucial. And even though I talked about this being for the United States, I mean, most of this can be applied to every other place had similar things going on. I was, when I was a lot younger genealogist, I was under this impression that there were no ghost towns in Europe. And I found out that that is simply not true. One day I just did a Google search for show me towns in Germany that no longer exist, and
Yeah.
I got a list of them. And some of them, of course, were due to World War One and World War Two and
Yep.
other wars. And so that was really helpful because, I was under this apprehension that nobody ever got rid of a town over there. That in the United States, we're the only people that would walk away from a town. But
Your creative search techniques and examples of that were really helpful in finding stuff. I appreciate your sharing that.
oh, good. Um, I thought it might be helpful to use that blue diamond one repeatedly so you could see what different things turned up using the different tools that are available. And I've just been so pleased with all that I've been able to find on that search. And all you have to do is mention a state, and I'll probably be able to think of some family I'm researching or have researched there. And the cool part is there's so much stuff coming new all the time online that there's you can never say you're finished. There's always something.
That's one of the blessings of finding stuff online. It keeps
uh,
growing.
it's a
Yeah, thank you for sharing your extensive experience on finding these lost towns. We appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Uh,
My
uh,
pleasure.
Jerry, did you have any comments?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for sticking with us to uh, get this valuable information. We remind you that Next month, we'll be meeting on the 12th of July at 10 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. And we look forward to seeing you then. Goodbye.
Bye.